Story 1. Entitled Parent Switch Incident. Hey there, fellow Redditors. I've got a wild story to share with you all, so buckle up for this roller coaster of entitlement and karma. It all went down last weekend when I decided to hit up my local park for some quality Nintendo Switch time. I was engrossed in a game, totally in my own world, when out of nowhere, this woman storms up to me with the fury of 1,000 Karens. Let's call her Karen, because, well, it fits perfectly. Karen had her little tyke in tow, who seemed intrigued by my gaming setup. Now, I'm all for sharing the joy of gaming, but I wasn't too keen on lending my prized possession to a complete stranger and her kid. So, when Karen demanded that I hand over my Nintendo Switch, I politely declined, explaining that it's a personal item. Oh boy, you should have seen her face. It was like I denied her access to the secret treasure trove of parent entitlement. She started throwing a tantrum that would have made a toddler jealous. And there I was, trying to maintain my chill while this lady was on the verge of summoning an entitlement tornado. But wait, it gets better. Karen, in a bold move that shocked me, lunged forward and yanked my Nintendo Switch out of my hands. Can you believe the audacity? I mean, who does that? At this point, my patience was wearing thin, and I knew I had to call in the cavalry. So, I dialed up the local police and explained the whole absurd situation. Moments later, 2 officers arrived on the scene, and I finally felt a glimmer of hope. The officers calmly listened to both sides of the story, but let's be real, they had that entitled parent radar locked in. Karen, realizing her act wasn't going over well, switched from full-blown entitlement mode to pretending she was just innocently borrowing my Switch for her precious angel. Classic move, right? The officers weren't buying it, though. They swiftly took my Nintendo Switch back from Karen's clutches and handed it back to me. Seeing the tables turning, Karen shifted gears again, this time trying to win the sympathy card. But karma was finally catching up to her. Yep, you guessed it, those handcuffs came out, and Karen was arrested right then and there for theft and causing a public scene. As the officers led her away in cuffs, I couldn't help but feel a mix of satisfaction and disbelief. It was like justice was served up with a side of reality check. So, there you have it, dear Redditors. The entitled parent saga that unfolded right before my eyes, ending in a truly poetic fashion. My Nintendo Switch is safe and sound, and the entitled parent learned a hard lesson about respecting other people's stuff. Guys, if you're not subscribed to the channel, just take a second now and click that subscribe button. It does help support me a lot, and I really appreciate it. Wow, what an intense and dramatic story. Could you believe the entitled parent's audacious behavior, escalating tantrums, and the surprise twist of Karen physically taking the Nintendo Switch? Good job on the OP's decision to stand their ground and protect their personal property. It's so satisfying to see her being taken care of by the police.
Story 2. Entitled People. My aunt is suing my landlord. As I start to type this out, I don't even know where to begin. The degree of entitlement in my aunt and cousin are so extreme, it's going to be difficult to keep it concise. Let's start with the post title and work our way back. A couple of months ago, my aunt visits me from out of town. I have a really small apartment, so at night I would let her sleep in my bed and I'd go stay at my boyfriend's. One night she came home in an Uber from a party. She told me when I dropped her off that she was trying to get drunk. The next day early before I get up to drive home, she texts me and says that she fell in a hole when the Uber driver dropped her off, and then she says that the Uber driver ran over her foot. Already, I'm skeptical. Why skeptical, you ask? My aunt has a repeated history of lawsuits against previous employers, apartment buildings, landlords, and more. This isn't her first rodeo. My aunt is an obese woman, and she says that the injuries that were caused, like a slipped disc, etc., were not pre-existent and that her quality of life has changed. Some more context: me and others have always suspected she has Munchausen. She has always used her health problems to get attention or money, and all she talks about are her consistent health problems. It's always something, but none of the resolutions for these presumed health problems ever are pursued to be resolved. I get back and she's walking around, maybe limping a bit, but she kept saying it was her foot hurting and she kept icing her foot while her leg was stretched straight out. The tests she has done later say she has a partially torn ACL. My best friend recently had that injury and there is no way she could have laid her leg out flat like that. A couple of days after she leaves she texts me to tell me she is suing Uber. I don't acknowledge the text and a couple days later she tells me she is suing my landlord. Immediately, I'm livid. If this were any other person I knew motivations would be different. But I know my aunt and her pattern of behavior in her life speaks volumes. She doesn't care about the fact she is compromising my living situation for her own benefit. So how does the entitlement come in? Not only does she think she's entitled to my safety in my own home, but not a week before she writes a laundry list of things she wants my father, her brother, to pay for her daughter's wedding. As a single mother, my family took her daughter under our wing. She would come stay with us for summers, and at Christmas, my mom would get her more gifts that we'd get. When we'd be bratty kids and complain, she'd tell us that she didn't have a dad to give her gifts, and she didn't want her to feel left out. Why isn't her mother buying her gifts, you ask? Because of her horrendous management of the good money she does make. She says she is always broke, but she has a good salary job, but all her money goes God knows where. Paying her astronomical credit card payments? I know it's not going to medical bills, because she frequently brags about how she doesn't pay her medical bills. Who brags about that? Her phone rings all day, collectors calling her. So let's get back to now, asking my dad for thousands of dollars for the wedding, all while she's suing his daughter's landlord behind his back. What does she need money for, you ask? Well, her daughter is getting married in October, and like she wrote in that email, she needs money for the wedding. So when I told my parents, my dad got pissed and called, emailed, and texted her that she needed to drop this. She never responded. Timing was so bad because the following week her daughter was supposed to come stay with me for a couple days. I almost told her not to come, but it was already too late, I felt, and I decided I'd try to be the bigger person. After all, she isn't her mom, but I should have remembered that after 2 years of living with them, she is in fact her mother. Oddly enough, I had a medical emergency with my dog the night before she was supposed to stay here, and I couldn't have 2 additional people in my 600 square foot apartment and be able to take care of my ailing dog properly. So she was able to go stay with a friend. I saw her the first day she was here. I didn't bring anything up and she didn't either, but it was clear there was a huge elephant in the room. That day my aunt decides to answer my dad by starting a group chat with the 3 of us and sending a pic of her lawyer's card and says we can ask him any questions. My dad angrily replies something like, "Don't text me in an angry way." I didn't hear from my cousin at all that second day, and finally, she texts me this long text about how she doesn't feel comfortable with seeing me BC of what just happened, and she says she is saddened by the lack of empathy shown to her mother when her mother needs this money to pay her medical bills. And how now this is going to ruin her wedding. At this point, I let it rip. I pointed out how those funds from the suit wouldn't go to those medical bills BC she doesn't pay them, and that's a well-known fact by those to know her. So I asked her what will the funds go for, her wedding? I also brought up her entitlement as well, and in the same sentence where she refutes her entitlement she starts saying where was the money when I asked for, blah blah blah. One of those things she said was, where was the money I asked for from the will? Our grandmother's will, who isn't even in the grave yet. I could go on about my cousin and aunt's entitlement to a little cut of everything me and my family has, but I'll end with a little story to give you a glimpse into the entitlement. When I moved to Utah, where they both lived, I had to go home to get my stuff and come back. I had originally been visiting and didn't plan on moving, but when I saw it, I wanted to stay. So when I went home to get my things, a mutual friend of ours hung out with the both of them at Dave and Buster's. This story was told to me by this mutual friend when I was trying to excuse their mistreatment and financial abuse they put me through. At the time I knew they were opportunistic, but I never thought they'd do that to their own family, so I would try and make excuses for them. Finally the friend stops me and tells me, "I wasn't going to tell you this, but I think you need to hear this." While out at Dave and Buster's, they, mostly my aunt, was complaining about how she had no money. My friend, who has no qualms about calling people out, asks her, "Then why are you out spending money right now?" Her response? "It's okay, Gabby has money." Edit: since me and my cousin had that nasty text convo I wrote about, that is the last we have spoken. Full NC, and I have no desire to ever speak to them again. Thank you everyone who has validated my experience and gave me great advice. After years of being gaslighted by them about their presumed victimhood, it has been a challenge for me to come out of that cloud and see them for who they really are. Guys, OP's aunt and cousin has questionable patterns of behavior. The sense of entitlement is disgusting. I don't know about you guys, but this is not normal. Imagine repeated lawsuits to her tendency to use health problems for attention and financial gain. It downright sounds fraud to me. Good thing OP distanced herself and created boundaries, recognized unhealthy behaviors, and prioritizing her own well-being. Before we proceed to the comments, guys, subscribe to my channel now. Now let's read some comments. Busy tirade thankful. Disclaimer: I have not read the other comments. Your GF would have received an inherited IRA. Unlike the IRA you're thinking of, this actually has to be withdrawn within 10 years or there's a massive penalty. You also pay taxes on the withdrawals. So many people withdraw small amounts to keep their annual tax burden lower while also knowing they have to withdraw all of it in 10 years. It's very possible she is withdrawing and putting right back into another investment fund. Don't assume she's living large, especially if her income is limited and there's no evidence or significant purchases. How do I know this? I'm currently doing it myself. How to bring it up? Just say what you saw. Ask her about it. Don't level accusations at her before you have any idea what's going on. Story 3. Went into work with a severe allergic reaction. Just read a story on here that reminded me of this incident. This happened earlier this year, and it was a fast food job. To be fair, my managers were really awesome about letting people take sick days if needed, but upper management had been getting on them about this, so the manager this happened with was just as exasperated as I was about it. I have gotten a micro cut on my arm that got infected. It looked and acted like a pimple, but hurt and wouldn't go away no matter what I did. I finally went into the doctor when it started turning purple because I was concerned and ended up put on a medication that I turned out to be allergic to. On day 9 of the medication I had a full head to toe rash, just swollen and itchy, and I had a shift the next day. I called my manager and she, following the new policy, told me that either I needed to find someone to cover my shift or come in anyway. She said she'd check on me before my shift to assess how bad it was. There wouldn't be any actual risk to guests, it just didn't look good. Lo and behold, I couldn't get the shift covered on such short notice. I had wrapped my whole body in gauze because having a layer over the rash stopped the itching, so I dressed casual, put my work clothes in a bag, and got there 30 minutes early, my norm 'cause I get food before my shift. I walked in and the manager looked at me, still wrapped in gauze, though I had unwrapped my head, and said, "Yeah, you're not working today, let me know when you're ready to order." The best part was that one of the directors was in the break area, and he was stunned to see an employee honestly looked to be in really bad condition, was even at work that day. We talked and they started allowing a bit more leniency on call-outs. A manager could decide over a phone call, ask for a pic of a doctor's note, or otherwise give permission for staff to simply call out if no one was found to take the shift and the staff member's condition was deemed unfit for work. Comments: Wolfgang 784. I once had a boss who made people work sick and at one point didn't send an employee home until 3 different customers asked to speak to him, GM, about why this employee was working while so obviously sick. Subscribe for daily Reddit stories.